a specific chemist here in Rome, if I remember. Okay. But the balance sheet brings data that I think are static, and we take that data for a starting point. Then we measure our achievement by a comparison of that balance sheet. But the main problem is that here in Italy the balance sheet is not so relevant in understanding the sustainability of a film, because there is a regulation which is not quite clear, and there are some consultants that typically manage in moving some values from a certain chapter to another. So I think that for us it was not a very good validation frame.
Yes, well, just to give another hint, basically we started from assuming 2 years in the past of the balance sheets of the pharmacy. We built this case study on the work of a couple of our students who had, at the time, their relatives who were running a pharmacy, actually. Of course, we tried to understand what was the data into the balance sheets of the pharmacy during the last 2 years, and of course we were also observing during the time of their dissertation what were the data. So we were basically concerned about first understanding how things were moving around in terms of inventory, and financially speaking, we mainly relied on the data from the balance sheets, which, as Riccardo said, were a little bit probably biased, but all the same, it gave us a pretty good understanding of how things were moving around, and of course, we don't know if the model was, after they implemented it, for the future simulations was pretty close to what was the further development. So, but it was for the time of the observation, at least. And another question.
Has the model been applied to real cases? Real situations?
Yes, of course, and the results that are presented in the presentation relate with a real case, and I think that we should implement this kind of model and the decision support system in. I think in more cases, and analyzing more chemist shop, because we had the opportunity to work with one chemist shop, with, of course, is a great chemist shop, has a good managerial culture. So a lot of policies were implemented. The chemist itself was very, I think, open to this kind, to this technology. But of course, maybe we need more cases in order to validate, more the decision support system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. And we go to the next presentation, which is from Stefania Migliavacca from Eni Corporate. And the title is Energy and Environmental Forecasts, a System Dynamics Model for Italy. I think you already preloaded your presentation, right? All right, so we should have it here. Where is it? There you go. Ok, thanks. Se vuoi puoi andare, sì, puoi anche usare questo per andare o quello.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stefano, and good afternoon to everybody. The topic of my presentation is an example of how system dynamics could help when you're trying to forecast energy and environmental issue. And my name is Stefania Migliavacca, and I work for Eni Corporate University, which is the corporate university of the Italian oil company. So, but I'm taking you back to 2002, when I was a young researcher, and I joined a research group working for working for the Italian government. I was absolutely a junior member of this group, and it was a great challenge for me, and of course a great training experience working for the government and working on system dynamics. 2002 was a great opportunity for Italy about Kyoto Protocol, because in 2002, the Italian government issued a Law 39 trying to enforce the European Directive for the Promotion of Renewables Energy. And also in June, in the same year, Italy ratified the Kyoto Protocol. And as a consequence of this, in October, the government issued the third national communication under the UNFCCC. And then in December, the new CHIP resolution. And those last two documents were based on a system dynamic model called CHEPRIG, which is not a nice name, but stands for, Calculation of Emission and Policies for the Reduction of Italian Greenhouse Gases. It was a system dynamic approach model. It was extremely flexible, and it was following a bottom-up approach. So starting from subsector, trying to build up the total greenhouse gases amount for Italy. And of course, the target was to forecast Italian energy consumption and, of course, greenhouse gases emission from year 2000 to 2020, even if the first commitment period was, for the Kyoto Protocol was 2008-2012. And as a consequence, the second target was to provide a framework for the assessment of alternative emission reduction paths. This model was made up of 3 blocks. The first was the energy sector, the second was the industrial sector, and the third was the transportation sector. I can talk in details about the industrial sector because I work on it, but you can find some details about also the energy and the transportation sectors. We had 11 subsectors, and also adding agriculture and residential sector. And we mainly model 3 key variables that are activity level, means the value added of this sector or these subsectors, energy intensity, and also the fuel mix of each subsectors. And we model those variables through statistic and econometric analysis of the past 30 years for Italy, and then let them interact with the energy prices. Of course, now 10 years have passed, so we can try to compare our scenarios to the actual values for energy consumption and also for emissions for Italy. This is more or less the structure of the industrial sector, starting from GDP scenarios, alternative scenarios, and energy intensity reduction scenarios. We build a path for energy consumption. Then we split the total energy consumption for Italy on the basis of the fuel mix, so distinguishing between oil, gas, coal, and so on. Basically, depending on energy prices, international energy prices. Then from the fuel mix, we derive the greenhouse gases emissions for Italy. And now comparing what we tried to forecast more than 10 years ago, I clearly remember when we made our first hypothesis on the low scenario of our model, we set an average annual growth rate for GDP that was 0.5%. But our client said, no, too little, please, set it to 1%. And of course, since the client is always right, we have a low case of 1%, but from 2000 to 2010, the Italian GDP average annual growth rate was 0.3%. So maybe we were right. But even with this small adjustment, our low scenario seems to be quite near to the actual value of what happened in the last 10 years for Italy about GDP, primary energy consumption, and also greenhouse gases emissions. Of course, those results do not depend from the energy policy in Italy or the environmental policy in Italy, but depends on the economic crisis in the last 5 years. In this graph, you have the green line representing the greenhouse gases emissions for Italy from 1990 to 2010. And of course, you can appreciate the effect of the economic crisis. But the light blue line is our low scenario, and again, it seems to be quite consistent with actual values. My conclusions: 10 years ago, no one would have bet €1 on Italy meeting the Kyoto target in the first commitment period, but also because in 2002, when we modeled this situation, Italian CO2 emissions, I'm only talking about CO2 emissions, not greenhouse gases emissions, were running out of control. We were more or less 20% over the Kyoto target. And the target was to reduce by 6.5%. So we were quite far away from the target. Then several policies and measures were planned to commit to reach this target, but no concrete action were taken, despite of those documents about cheaper resolution, third national communication, and so on. But thanks to economic crisis, Italy met the Kyoto target, and you can find more details about this on a recent report, Fondazione Sviluppo Sostenibile. In spite of this, I mean, our model overestimated greenhouse gases emissions, even if, I could say, the low case was quite near to reality. I choose this case study, even is quite old, because we are talking about 12 years ago, but now we can, compare our result to the actual value. So, it's quite a useful exercise, in my opinion. And I also would like to say that I teach system dynamics to post-degree students, and also that system dynamics is applied inside in my company in more or less 2 or 3 different business units, trying to modeling the transportation sector in the refining and marketing division, and also trying to model the power sector in gas and power division. So, of course, I can talk about our models, our inside models, and I choose this, neutral model to show you some results. But, I can witness the how much system dynamics is a useful tool also inside business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefania. Oh, I didn't even show her the 5 minutes sheet, so thank you very much. I don't know if there are, we're sure for sure we have space for a couple of questions.
It would be nice to know how you got the agreement with the man over there to have the crisis.
I was not interested. I'm quite an environmentalist girl, I think, but no one could forecast what happens in 2007. So normally when you model environmental and energy issue, you know that it depends from GDP, population, and energy consumption. And you normally say, okay, no one wants to load the GDP, no one wants to decrease population, but I mean, it happens because GDP, they grow, so unfortunately, but it was good for, I don't know, if, I mean, in my opinion, it's not good for the environment because you don't have change in the structure of your economy, but just change in the GDP. So it's not going to.
Okay, thank you. One more.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Just a question. Has a system dynamicist, how do you think, to what extent system dynamics was useful? I mean, to what extent system dynamics gave you, as a researcher, a further insight in respect to econometrics? Because the question is because I've seen that you used a lot of econometrics. So I was wondering whether you are able to kind of separate and give us a flavor of what is the additional value that system dynamics puts in your research, which is, I saw that Matt was fairly able to kind of foresee things happening.
We do not try to separate, we try to merge econometric inside system dynamics, which was not easy because we try to use econometric techniques to study energy prices, basically, and then try to let energy prices influence our system dynamics model. So it was, I mean, trying to merge the two techniques just to get best from econometric analysis and system dynamics. Even because we find out that, of course, I mean, I really believe that system dynamics is, you can communicate best with system dynamics than with econometric techniques, especially when you're talking with politicians and with the government. People are not so expert in econometric techniques. So when you're showing stocks and flows, it's a little bit easier to talk together and to understand what you're explaining than showing econometrics techniques and models. So we try to get the best from those two instruments.
One last.
Very nice presentation. I would like to know which were and which are the main levers on which you could make simulations. So if the economic crisis would not happen, which were the levers on which you could make some simulation in order to bring the, say, the results near the target one?
Yes, I forgot to mention that the base case for this model estimated a surplus in greenhouse gases emission with reference to the target of more or less 93 million tons of CO2 equivalent, which is a lot. And, but also we have a list of further policies and measures that government could choose to add to the program, to the cheaper solution, in order to scale down this surplus. So we made a list of real policy and measures that the state, the Italian government could choose to implement just to scale down this, this surplus. No, we didn't indicate priorities because, of course, it's a policy issue. We can't. But we, for example, we did a lot of interviews with technicians from each subsector. I'm talking about industry again, industrial sector, because it was the one I work with, so we could list policies and measures. Then the priority list, I think, is political issue. But again, none of those actions were taken in 2002. So the final result is completely depending on the economic crisis.
Thank you. All right, so thanks, Stefania. Thank you for your presentation. So we have the last presentation for this session, and thanks to Stefania, we have recovered some minutes. And the next presentation is from Anna Cagliano from the Politecnico di Torino, and she will tell us about applying system dynamics to study the diffusion of a mobile application supporting city logistics. So just a second.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Stefano. Today I will introduce you to a system dynamics model that analyzes the diffusion of a mobile application supporting supply chain management in urban contexts. The work is co-authored by Professors De Marco and Raffaele. So, the system dynamics model is part of the simulation and optimization of urban logistics project we carried out in collaboration with Telecom Italia, whose aim is developing a new mobile application supporting the urban distribution of fresh food. This app assists in a lot of tasks, such as order management, inventory control, receiving, dispatching, vehicle routing management, and so on. And it can be integrated with a system of product traceability by means of RFID and NFC technologies, a system of electronic payments, again based on NFC, and a time-sensitive delivery service. So the system dynamics model has 4 goals. The first one is assessing the diffusion of the mobile application. The second is assessing the diffusion of its additional services, meaning the services that enable the management of product traceability, electronic payment, and time-sensitive delivery. The third goal is evaluating the impacts that the use of this app has on the inventory and business performance. And finally, forecasting the revenue for the company providing the mobile services. In developing the model, we considered a 3-echelon supply chain composed of farms, retailers, and consumers operating in the Torino area. The model applies and adapts the system dynamics formulations of the best diffusion model and of the supply chain management model by Sturman. We use the VenSim DSS as a software. Simulations rely on 1-day time intervals and an horizon of 156 weeks. I have to say that this model extends a previous system dynamics model we developed, whose aim was forecasting the diffusion of the basic mobile application, meaning the one without the additional services. I also have to say that the model is quite huge. In fact, it is made up of 10 interconnected submodels. We have some models studying the diffusion of the basic app without the additional services among farms, retailers, and consumers. We have a couple of submodels dealing with the dynamics of inventory and of user satisfaction with the app and its additional services. Other 2 submodels deals with the adoption of the service managing product traceability. And then we have, of course, some models about the diffusion of the electronic payment systems and the time-sensitive delivery service. Finally, we have a submodel dealing with the revenue for the service provider. the red blocks show the part that we added to the previous system dynamics model. So the overall behavior of the system is ruled by some feedback loops. I'm going to show you 3 examples, and I'm focusing on the first one, the receiving loop. The receiving loop says that if the number of retailers in this case, but the same holds for farms, for example. However, it's the number of retailers adopting the service based on NFC and RFID to support product traceability. If the number of these retailers increases, of course, we have an increased level of real-time information in our supply chain. And this allows retailers to save time in some of their warehousing activities. For example, they can speed up the task of receiving goods at the warehouse. If you save time, for example, in receiving goods, that means that you have more time to perform the other warehouse activities. For example, order processing. So if you have more time to process orders, you will fulfill orders more quickly. That means that you will increase your shipment rate, and the consumer will see their orders be fulfilled in a shorter time. So consumer satisfaction increases, and through word of mouth, consumers will stimulate other retailers to adopt, first of all, the basic app that enables having the additional services. And so the number of retailers adopting the basic app increases. But after that, the more the retailers adopting the basic app, the more the retailers that will adopt also the service for managing product traceability. I'm skipping the other 2 examples of feedback loops just for time reasons. And here, of course, I don't have time to go into the details of the model, but I just want to give you a flavor of the structure of the model. That's why I'm showing here some of the sub-models. This is the sum model about the diffusion of the mobile application among retailers. This is the dynamics of retailer inventory and how we computed and simulated the consumer satisfaction. This is the adoption of product traceability service, and here we have the adoption of the time-sensitive delivery service by retailers and farms. Okay, coming to the results of this model. As far as the diffusion of the basic app is concerned, we compared 2 scenarios. The blue one is when no other additional services than the mobile application are available. That was basically the original model. And the red one is the diffusion of the basic app when you know that you can integrate it with the added value additional services. Well, the market saturation times are not so different in the 2 scenarios because already when we add just the basic mobile application with no additional services, as you can see, we got quite interesting saturation times in our reference community. So it does not make sense to expect saturation times that are pretty much shorter when you offer also the additional services. Coming to the diffusion of the additional services, their diffusion processes are quite similar to the diffusion process of the basic mobile app. As you can see here, comparing the diffusion of the app among consumers with the diffusion among, again, consumers of the NFC payment integrated into basic app. But what's more important is that the dynamics of the diffusion of the additional services guides the diffusion of the basic mobile app. We simulated some scenarios with different different additional services adoption rate. And we saw that if the adoption rate of the additional service is decreased, because, for example, the potential users are not so aware of the benefits of these additional services, the dynamics of the adoption of the basic mobile app decreases as well. Talking about the revenue for the mobile service providers, I have to say that the increased availability of real-time information that is basically introduced by the product traceability system determines low inventory levels and an increased order frequency. Why an increase in the order frequency? Because if the inventory levels goes down and your demand stays steady, of course, if you want to keep your inventory level low, you will have to place orders more frequently, and these orders will be about a decreased quantity of material than before. And this is quite important for the mobile service providers' revenue because associated to each order that is managed with the mobile app and its additional services, there is a dispatching and a receiving fee. So the more orders in the system, the more the revenues because of these fees that are associated to the order managed through the mobile app. We simulated 3 different scenarios with different increases in the order frequency equal to plus 10%, plus 30%, and plus 50%. Probably in your handouts here you have 30% again. Sorry for that, it's 50%. The sensitivity analysis shows that the efficiency and the reliability of the mobile application services play a role in the diffusion of the app and its additional services, mainly for farms and consumers. Price is not so relevant for the diffusion process, meaning that potential users are willing to pay even a slightly high price in order to get an efficient and reliable service. Based on the result, we can suggest some policies in order to stimulate the diffusion of this app and its related services. We saw that the adoption of the additional services is very relevant to both the diffusion of the basic app and the service provider's revenue. So we highly recommend the service provider to conduce campaigns to make all the supply chain echelons understand the benefits of using the additional services. Also, a high level of efficiency and reliability is highly recommended in order to stimulate the adoption, especially as we saw by farms and consumers. So the service provider should work on increasing the reliability of data transmission through the 3G and the 4G networks. And if farms and consumers adopt, through persuasion and word of mouth, they will stimulate the adoption by retailers. The retailers, in turn, again, through word of mouth and persuasion actions, can make the community of adopting farm and consumers furtherly grow. Also, through emulation actions, new retailers that have not adopted the mobile app and its services yet can look at the benefits the retailers that have already adopted them are enjoying, and they can adopt. So this basically is the way how we forecast the diffusion of this app among the potential users. Okay? Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anna. Interesting presentation. I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a curiosity. How come that you decided to add the 3 echelons that you mentioned, and why you chose those ones? And furthermore, what kind of data did you avail yourself? So where did you find the data for this? Thanks.
Yeah. The answer to your first question, we chose the quite simple supply chain because we realized that this problem and this model would be quite complex because we are mixing a diffusion process with a supply chain performance. So together with Telecom Italia, we just chose a 3 echelon, just 3 echelon in our supply chain: farm, retailer, and consumers, because we focused mainly on fruit and vegetables. So that's why we have farm and so on. The second question about the data, we performed interviews to these actors, to the selected actors in the Torino area, asking them about their business processes and about quantitative data in order to enter them in our system dynamics model.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, one there.
Yeah? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the company just told us we want to know about the diffusion, about the impact on supply chain performance. Please choose the tool, the methodology you think more appropriate. And we thought that given the complexity and the topic of, given the complexity of the model and the topic, system dynamics was quite appropriate. I have to say that our partner in Telecom Italia did not know system dynamics before. If they implemented this suggestion, well, now they are at a prototype stage of the app. And of course, if I hope they will start selling this kind of mobile service, they for sure will compare the actual results with our forecasts. And of course, I'm quite curious to see what's going to happen.
Thank you. One last. Yeah. But, okay. Maybe you can...
Mm-hmm. Well, the first model we took about 4 months, if I'm not wrong. Basically 3 people, me and another colleague and a master student. That we have the extension with the additional services. That I have to say was more difficult than starting from greenfield, of course, because we had to integrate other variables, other dynamics in an already existing model. The extension, again, took about 3 months, like that.
So that means 12 and 3 full-time people working for 4 months?
Yeah, basically we had 1 student working full-time and 2, me and another colleague working part-time. So basically 2 people full-time.
2 full-time equivalents. Okay, thank you very much. So now it's time for the coffee break. I would kindly ask you to, just to recover time, to keep the coffee break a little bit shorter, something like 25 minutes, if it's possible. Now it was scheduled to be at 15:40, so we could start at 4:25. if it's okay, so that we will have just lost 5 minutes on the schedule. Thanks again, Anna, and I would also advise that we have the participation certificate available at the desk, so you can choose to either take it now or when you're leaving later on. Okay, thank you, and see you here at 4:25. Thanks.